G'day, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Mindful Men podcast. I'm your host, Simon Rennie, and today we're getting mindful about relationships, and in particular, we're going to be looking at patriarchy and how that impacts relationships as well. And I'm really excited. I've got Bev Ehrlich. Is that right, Bev?
Yeah, Ehrlich.
You're from South Africa, but you're living in Israel at the moment.
That's right. I was born in South Africa, but I've lived in Israel for longer than I ever lived there.
Wonderful.
Come from the beautiful city of Cape Town.
Awesome. Nice. And you're a mum, you're a grandmother as well, and you've studied in psychology and education, and you're a relationships coach as well.
100%.
It's quite a CV you've
Spot
got
on.
there. So I'd like to start off by, letting my guests introduce themselves and tell us a bit about their story and some of the key life events, like, growing up and have you traveled? What's some of the key points of your life that you'd like to share?
So as I said, I was born in South Africa. I was born in a small town, actually, out of Cape Town. Grew up in Cape Town, and at a very young age, I knew I wanted to come live in Israel. And I met my husband, well, my future husband, and he had the same dream. So that was great. And after we were married a year, we came to live here, and we have 4 children and lots of grandchildren, all living here close by us, which is
Yeah.
lovely.
What drew you towards Israel?
I think as a Jew, that was just always, it was sort of, I guess we kind of were fed that at home, you know. We were brought here, both my husband and I were brought here on family trips with our families when we were younger. There was always this love in the home, and we were concerned about Israel, what's going on in Israel. The truth is, though, I'm speaking to someone from Australia, that my parents weren't very encouraging of the move. They wanted me to go to Australia. And in fact, my father did a whole lot of medical exams to get into Australia. And I have quite a lot of family in various parts of Australia, which was considered, a comfortable move from South Africa. Similar.
Yeah.
Israel was not considered a comfortable move. But I was brought up with Hebrew. I went to university, learned more Hebrew. My husband did well at Hebrew. So it was kind of a very natural move for us as a young couple.
I've never been to Israel, but I see what happens on the news and so forth. Is it like dangerous to live there? Like, what's it like living there?
On a daily basis, for us, we feel pretty safe. But yeah, it's not a friendly neighborhood, and but we do go about our lives. It's a very modern country that's developing in leaps and bounds, and our children are involved in various creative activities and work that really you can see startup nation. And yeah, we just went to a museum last week about how it would take 2 days to get from our place to Jerusalem. It now takes 25 minutes on a modern train.
Oh, wow.
That's like remarkable. 25 minutes is on the train, and you get off 25 minutes later and you're there. What would take 2 days on a dangerous road, when the state was being built. So it's wonderful. What can I tell you?
Wonderful. And I mentioned before you're a mum and a grandmother, and I love talking to parents as well because I'm a parent. I've got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. So I'm usually either sick from kids being sick or I'm sleep deprived. But I love to hear about what does it mean to you to be a mum and a grandparent as well?
So I'll start with the downside first, and that is, as a mom to older children and grandchildren, I'm still sleep deprived sometimes. We want to be very helpful to them, available to them. I really feel that as the privilege of being a grandmother and a relatively young grandmother or energetic grandmother, I can really spend time, and there are lots of them. I can really spend time getting to know these people whom I adore.
Yeah.
And really just hanging out with them, not having the so much of the tension of parenting around it, just being able to be there with them. but sometimes having the exhaustion of parenting when if somebody's, going through a crisis, there was a family funeral this week, and you pull together, and that might mean late nights, early mornings.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you've
So
studied
that's
in
okay.
psychology and education. Tell us a bit about why you chose those particular fields to study in.
Right. I think probably everybody that you'll ask will tell you, I've kind of always been a psychologist, right? I
Yep.
was, as a friend, I was the psychologist. I was brought up in a house. My father was a physician, and in a generation gone by where it was home visits and very caring, he would have people come to our home. He had his own clinic, but on the weekends, people would come to our home, and I knew that behind the door he was either sitting with someone or doing healing work, whatever he was doing.
Yeah.
So I think that was very much a part of what I nursed as growing up. My mother worked for various charities, and very traditional home. He was a physician, she was a stay-at-home mom. And even though I know we're going to talk about patriarchy and what that is, I still very much, it was a comfortable home for me to grow up in many ways.
And so, like a
Understanding
lot of
as
people
well.
that studies things like psychology and social work or counseling have had their own journey with mental health and so forth. Did you
Right.
find that, or did you find it more of just a natural fit just because of your curiosity?
It was both, and I'm also married to a physician, and a really wonderful gentleman who's had his own challenges with depression.
Hmm.
And I think when we were hit with that as a couple, as a family, we began our own journey on, well, what is this? How do we heal? And then I realized, wow, there's so many couples who struggle, and that is a big thing for them, especially male depression.
Mm.
So I think that's what drew me to that.
Yeah. Did that really impact you, like within your household, like, your partner going through depression? Did it influence how you interacted or, felt about each other?
Yeah, I was kind of like Mad Woman. Like, if you could imagine this hair standing up, that's what it was like. I
Yeah.
know I seem kind of normal now, right? you you
What's
you can't see
normal?
me flipping my, more or less, right? You can't see me flipping my lid, but it took me a long time to find the tools we needed and get the proper help that we needed. I'm not just talking about the medical aspect. I'm talking about that emotional support wasn't readily available, what we needed. And then we were fortunate to find, and I thought, wow, this is where I want to be. And I immersed myself with these teachers or these helpers, and I took on the journey.
Yeah. And is
And
that
that's what
what
I
got
do
you into
now.
the relationships side of things?
Very much so, yeah. Seeing the challenge, seeing how my behavior was not helping my husband. I wasn't being able to, where I wasn't being able to be supportive. What was going on with me? Why was that happening?
Yeah.
Understanding, my own background and what I brought into my marriage.
Yeah, it's a really valid point that you raised, because when one of us in a relationship, and that's probably me in my relationship, is the mental health. So I've lived with depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder for since I was 8 years old, almost.
Mm,
Starting with OCD,
did
and
you hear
then
that?
gradually developed into depression and anxiety. And my wife's like my rock, but it's important to reflect that when one of us is going through mental health challenges, or even just challenges in general, it does impact the other person in the relationship as well. And it sounds like it did have a bit of a profound impact on your household. Did it impact your children in any way, or was this before kids? Or
So no, it was with the kids, but what I really want to address, and of course it had an impact on them and their partnerships and stuff.
yeah.
But what I really want to address, what you're saying, is how that flow between you and your wife, me and my husband, that we came from a place of seeing relationships as me and you.
Mhm.
And the whole shift was to us. We're a team and we're
Yeah.
in this together. And it's not about, you better get your act together. It's, oh my gosh, we need to do something together. And that whole shift was like magic. Like,
Yeah.
we're in this together. Just recently, my father-in-law lives with us, and
Hmm.
that's just over the last year. And someone said to me, "But it's not your father." And that whole shift from it's not about me and him, it's about us. I'm like, of course he lives with us. I live with my husband, and he needed a place, and we were able to take him in, and it's we. We're going to manage this together. It's not, this is your dad, you deal with it, beside him being a delightful man that's blessed our lives, which does make a difference and it makes it a lot easier. But it's that shift from the you and me to the us to the team. If you think about it, Simon, like your biosphere, we're not above and we're not below. We are dependent on our relationships like we are on our home or the place that we live. So if I'm going to scream and yell here, my partner's going to punish and retaliate here. It's like you can picture your living room. We can throw all the garbage we like in the living room, and we're just going to have that common space become more and more polluted, and we're going to breathe that bad air in. Do we want that? So it's not about, I'm going to win this argument, you're going to lose. No, if I'm going to win, I'm going to pay for it in some way. My partner's going to make damn sure that I pay for it. So we want to keep the environment clean, and we want to do that together, which means really, what is it you need right now? And how can I give it to you? And this is what I need. And then learning to cherish what healthy giving and getting bring to a relationship.
I love that teamwork notion. While you were talking, I was thinking about also the client-therapist relationship as well. And I've been into a lot of psychologists. I've been to psychiatrists. I've been to counselors, to mental health social workers, and the ones that I've valued the most were the ones where it was more of a team effort and coming up with ideas together and solutions together, as opposed to, well, you need to do this, this, and this to rectify that situation. So, and it's the same within a relationship, husband and wife, or same-sex relationship, whatever it is, or even dad and son, or mother and daughter, or whatever. It's when you work as a team, things become a bit more cohesive and coherent, and you can move quicker through these difficult times, as opposed to trying to figure it out yourself. So
you've put a lot of pearls in there. People say to me, I'm right and he's wrong. It's not about who's right and who's wrong. The relational answer to that question is, who cares? How are we going to manage this?
Definitely.
How are we going to manage this in a way that we can manage this? Not that the Joneses next door would manage it. They can do it their way. They have to sort out their issues. How are we going to manage this? It's definitely not a right or wrong thing. Way to go.
So let's chat about relationships and patriarchy. And when we were setting up this, I'm thinking, okay, what's Bev going to say about patriarchy? Because whenever I've spoken about patriarchy through my studies more so, and I've finished my Masters of Social Work last year, whenever whoever brings it up comes from almost like that feminist perspective. And it's like that us and them, us and you type discussion. But I was glad when you were talking about teamwork. And so I'm interested to see what your perspective of patriarchy is, and how you see it as impacting relationships. So based on your experience, both as a professional and a person and private as well, how would you define patriarchy in 2022? And has it changed over the years, or is it very much the same?
So those are all great questions. I'm going to jump in where you started about the feminist movement. The feminist movement brought this great, whatever you can do, I can do. Women could cross a line. I don't need to wear makeup. I can have my hair short. I can wear pants. I can do any job that any man can do. What they didn't address is the concept of the relationship. Like, I can do what you do. When we meet at the end of the day, let's meet eye to eye and see how we're going to live this life together. Because it's not about just self-empowerment. Look here, I'm strong, and basically F off. I'm going to do what I want to do, and you are not going to tell me what to do. That is not a relational answer. And today, I would say more women and men are wanting relationships to carry on into our 80s and 90s, long walks on the beach where we can still have deep conversations. But the truth is, we're not raising our boys to give that. So when I see couples in my office, it's often these grandiose women, more shut down men who the men often don't even know why they're there. So they just know that their wives are unhappy, let's say, right? And I'm talking about a sort of a heterosexual normative kind of couple. So when I think of patriarchy, this is what I've learned from Carol Gilligan and Terry Real. If you think of the great divide, when a baby's born, we divide them into male, female attributes. So male attributes will be strong, independent, leadership. Female attributes will be soft, emotional, vulnerable. And while we want our children to have all of those, in reality, we actually value the male qualities and male attributes. And that creates this. And women, we collude with that. We encourage it in many ways, especially the feminist movement, encouraging independence, and vulnerability is seen as weakness, not weakness, but vulnerability, emotional softness is seen as being below. So what we have here is that boys understand the code very young. They leave for kindergarten and they know boys don't cry. Boys are very often defined by their non-feminist attributes. So women can be defined as tomboys. Oh, that could be quite cute. But men will be defined as sissies if they have a strong softness to them. Sissies, fags. A lot of those negative labels are put on, and men are defined by not being women, if you like.
Yeah.
Rather than with women are defined by women and men are defined as not being women. And this divide, I put it like this one up, one down, doesn't create intimacy and connectedness. We need to see each other eye to eye. Yeah, I do a job, you do a job. At the end of the day, how are we going to manage this family together?
Yeah.
Any sort of thoughts, questions on that?
Yeah, no, it's got me thinking about the whole boys don't cry, boys can't show emotion thing. And I've often tell this on the podcast is growing up in where I grew up, it was a masculine environment. I had 4 boys in the household plus dad. And, we played football. We're very much alpha males, if you like. And I remember growing up and on the footy field and in the home, it was all around boys don't cry and boys can't show emotion. And what planted a seed in my mind, and this is growing up in the 90s, was a friend of mine at primary school was crying in the schoolyard. And I went up to him and said, mate, you've got to stop crying because boys don't cry. So even at a young age, and I was probably 8, 9 or 10 or so, I've been socially conditioned to believe that boys can't cry. And then he said to me, Simon, I can cry if I want to. And I was like, whoa, this is just far out there. What are you talking about? It's like I was talking like a different language. But it planted a seed in my mind, in the back of my mind, that I've held on to for a very long time. And this is what I'm doing now through Mindful Men is that boys can cry and boys can show emotion. And it doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you're a sissy. It doesn't mean you're feminine or anything like that. Maybe it's tuning into the softer side of you, but it doesn't make you any less of a man or male or anything.
We want to encourage them to become. We want to encourage our children to become full humans.
Yeah, that's right. And if we're going to get to that 80 or 90-year-old walking on the beach, we have to see eye to eye, and particularly in 2022, where social constructions of the household are very different to, say, the 60s, 70s, even earlier and even later, where men would go to work and be the breadwinners and the wives would stay home and the kids would follow suit with whatever dad did. If he was a laborer, they might become a laborer or a tradie or a doctor, or they follow the same suit. So now it's more of the world is the oyster. And for particularly people like I call them new age dads, and I've read some great articles around new age parenting, and it's where you're embracing the masculinity and the femininity in your life as a dad, so that when you're raising your children, particularly our sons, that they grow up feeling empowered to just follow whatever path they want to follow. And I guess this all comes down to social constructs. And you mentioned when a baby is born, we put them female, male. I remember when we were having our kids, and we didn't want them to wear blue and we didn't want them to wear pink, but that's all that was in the shops, in the clothing, so we had a real difficulty trying to find white, grey, beige kind of clothing that didn't have princesses or unicorns or superheroes on it, because we wanted our kids just to grow into whatever being they wanted to be. But I guess this all this
Right.
this is what we, I guess, get to with social constructions about what it is to be a person.
What
And
it is to be a male or a female. And
that's
you,
right.
you brought up a beautiful point about your great grandmother, I would imagine. If someone came up to her and said, a friend said to her, he's just not passionate. He just doesn't have passion. She'd say, he doesn't beat you. He brings home a good wage. Be happy with that.
Yeah.
And have that companionship. But today, women want more. They want the in-depth conversation and the intimacy. And we don't want to bring them down to meet their men. We want to bring the men up to meet them, because the men are also longing for that.
Yeah. And I think when we think about dads, particularly, like the idea of a stay-at-home dad, and it's challenging that social construction of patriarchy, that the dad has to go out and work and be the breadwinner. But there's a lot of dads, and myself included, who spent time being the stay-at-home dad and doing the domestic tasks and getting kids off to school and picking them up and so forth. And a lot of dads, when they're out and about in like at the shops or whatever, and someone says, "Oh, are you babysitting your kids today? Where's mum?"
Uh-huh.
Well, like, actually, I'm the stay-at-home dad. Mum's at work. So even in 2022, where dads are trying to, I guess, be more present with the kids and take on more of the caregiving role, and letting mums go back to work, because we've got huge issues of mums being out of the workforce for years on end while the kids are particularly young, and not being able to climb that ladder if they want to climb that corporate ladder, or do further study, or start a business or whatever they want to do, because they're resigned
Right.
to playing that socially constructed role of the caregiver. And and we've got, I'm not sure what it's like over there, but we've got superannuation. So superannuation is where money gets put aside throughout your working life, and then when you retire, you can draw down that as a pension. And a lot of mums don't have big buckets of money in their superannuation because of they're doing this unpaid caregivers role. But I think in
Right.
2022 and beyond, which we're trying to, there's a lot of dads out there that are trying to challenge that and switch roles up and have a more equal household. And we mentioned feminism at the top of the show, and I don't think feminism is all that bad. Like, I think there's a lot of guys that are tuning into some of the feminist concepts around equality and stuff like that. I guess when it comes to a relationship, as you said, it's an us thing, a team thing. It's not so much feminists versus patriarchal society, and it seems like they
Right.
clash all the time, but in reality, we
Right.
can take a lot from both. So patriarchy, do you see it being a purely male issue, or you mentioned before that it can go on either side of the coin as well?
I think we do things that we're not even aware of. They just seem
Mm.
such natural constructs. I'll give you a simple example. My husband was saying to me, when I wash dishes, I put the knife standing up or whatever. Something I'd never even noticed. When he washes the knives, he always puts the blade down. Can I also do that? I'm like, oh yeah. It's an inane example, right? And the very next day I was washing knives and I did it my way. And he commented about it in some kind of like sarcastic way, right? And I said to him, hang on, I need you to say that again more kindly. And I need you maybe to remind me, because it means I'm happy to do it, but because it's such a nothing thing for me, I might forget. But
Hmm.
because it means something to you, I'd like you to remind me. And just having said that to him, you need a part in this. You need a part in getting what you want. He didn't have to say it again. I remembered. Now I remembered to put the knives. We've been married over 30 years. Suddenly you're worried how I wash knives. You're bringing that up. But okay, I'm happy to do it for you, but I might need some help. This is what I need from you in order to do that. So we can get and give what our partners need and what we need.
Yeah.
And that's more cherishing behavior,
Yeah.
you
That
know.
knife conversation is one that happens in our household as well.
I'm sure, exactly.
Which is another, yeah, I'm surprised. It's great to hear that it's happening not just in my household, but in your household as well. Um,
Right. And it's a silly example, but the essence of it is I need you to help me give you what you need.
yeah. And communication is central to that. Like, you know, we
Exactly.
don't know what each other needs if we don't communicate openly. And you know, if one of us wants to challenge the role of patriarchy or feminism or whatever, we need to voice that in a, I guess,
Exactly.
in a constructive way as well, from
In
a
a kind where
team.
women need to be learning to speak more respectfully
Mm,
as well. Very often, they need to learn how to ask for what they want. Women are like this as well. That's part of patriarchy. And Carol Gilligan says it so beautifully. There's no relationship without voice,
mm,
and there's no voice without relationship.
yeah, I like that. That's really nice. So what
Yeah.
about with our kids though? So like, you know, we talked a bit about they're born into these identities. And you mentioned there's certain attributes that are favored over others, so potentially the masculine attributes. How can we as parents, I guess, in 2022 start to challenge this? You know, where can we help our kids grow up and to be the people that they want to be, as opposed to what society has already laid out for them? Like, what can we do from practical parenting tips?
I think each family would have to ask that the question themselves. I happen to come from a very traditional looking family, even this family
Mm-hmm.
that I'm in now. The women do work. My girls are from a different generation. I would say that their parenting is very much shared as much as possible, depending on the demands of each one's work.
Mm-hmm.
I think really it's a very individual. It's very individual. I have one of my sons, where his children will say, "Oh, I'm going to choose a straw from the cupboard now, but I'm not going to choose a girl's color, or I'm going to choose a boy's color for me, and I'm going to give my sister the girl's color." And I might say, "Oh, colors aren't for boys and girls. Colors are beautiful." Like it's
Mm.
almost like what you were saying about you don't want to dress your children in white, in pink and blue. Why not?
Well,
See,
yeah.
go put blue on your daughter.
Mm.
Go put a blue on your daughter's okay. Go put pink on your son. That's a different conversation, right? But little girls can be in blue already because they've crossed that line.
Yeah. I
But
love
it's
that you
you're not
brought up colors actually, because this has been a very recent discussion in our household. So our son, he's 5, and he's been talking in oh, this is a boy's color and this is a girl's color. And I think this is a great example for this question, like how do we help our kids, or how do parents help their kids, I guess, challenge these notions of traditional patriarchy in families. And color's a great one, because blue doesn't have to mean boy, pink doesn't have to mean girl. And we say to him all the time, pink's okay. You can wear pink if you want. You can go to dance class if you want. You can go to choir if you want. You don't have to be the football player. You don't have to be the musician. You can do whatever you want. And I think, like, and we're exploring that at the moment with him, because we've had him in things like swimming, and we've tried soccer and all these things. The other day he said, I want to do choir, and choir hasn't been something in our family that, I did music. I did guitar when I was growing up, but never singing. So we're like, if you want to sing, that's cool as well. And I had another great podcast episode with another guest, and he was saying that when his son was growing up, on the weekends he'd play footy, but on the weekdays he'd go to dance classes, or and do theater and stuff like that, which is, these
Right,
are the things that we can do, I think, to challenge these traditional notions of patriarchy and say, well, what, you can do anything that you want, and you don't have to see the
right,
world in boys and girls. You can see it in all sorts of ranges of color, and so forth. I think that's a great tip in itself, and I'm glad you brought up color, because it's a very recent discussion that we've had in this household,
right,
even down to eating off of pink plates and blue plates that we've got for the kids, like the plastic plates. You
right,
know.
right. My lifestyle is as a religious Jew, and that's
Mm.
very patriarchal.
Yeah. So can you describe that for us? Because I'm not Jewish. So describe how that
Mm.
shows up in your household.
Well, the men have very specific roles when it comes to religious living. They're obligated with certain prayers, whereas women aren't.
Mm-hmm.
Women are not obligated by time-bound constructs as much. So for us, it's almost like we were born into that and nobody's really challenged that very much. It seems to just work because that's part of the, possibly part of the collusion, part of, you don't necessarily think outside the box. I do think about it, and I'm less, I suppose, religious, if you like, than some
Hmm.
of the other members. But it's their comfortable place, and I wouldn't necessarily go and shake that up because
Yeah,
there's a value in living your life also where you feel a sense of belonging, a sense of comfort. I think there's
yeah.
value in that as well. When you do have a sense of belonging, you can become and emerge who you're supposed to be. So they might
Hmm.
not be rigid in my home, very rigid, as opposed to some other homes, dress codes, women don't wear pants, women cover
Hmm.
their hair. We might not be that rigid, but if it works for you, I always say when I see people in my clinic, it's not because they need to be fixed. Some of their behavior might need to be changed, but there's nothing that needs to be fixed. And not everything that comes to you is pathological. It's not
Mm.
pathological that you don't want to wear pants and cover your hair. That's okay. If it works for you, if it's something that you're struggling with, then let's unpack that.
Yeah. That's right. Just do what works. That's often in the therapy space, do what works for you. Do you ever find
Exactly.
that, like in the relationship work you do, that there might be one party who might be the more religious and the other party who's not so, or is starting to question it, and that's causing
Right.
friction? How does that, have you ever had that come up?
Yeah, so that comes up a lot with that right and wrong. And
Yeah.
it could be your political views. I mean, I told you I was just recently in Perth and you had elections. And within my sister's home, there were interesting discussions about what they were going to vote for, right?
Yeah.
There's always a sense of mourning in a relationship. So let's say in the American wars, the Republicans and the Democrats. So
Hmm.
you might your partner might be a Republican, strong, 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 and the other one might be a Democrat. And you go out for dinner and you're with a couple and they're both Democrats, and it's like a dagger in your heart. Like, look how beautiful it is that they're on the same page. Look how beautiful it is they're equally religious or whatever the issue. It doesn't matter. What matters is it worth mourning what I'm not getting because I'm getting so much more, or I can't live with this. I have to move on. So in our family, my husband is a lot more religious than I am.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to be supportive of that, but he doesn't expect me to follow that same role.
Why do you think that's the case? Like, why is your husband like minded like that to accept that? Like, I guess it would be hard for some people who are quite religious to
Because I
accept
think
that.
he's getting more than if he had that wife that looked the part.
Yeah. Okay.
I think he's getting more out of the relationship. And I think he's a little bit more open minded as well. But because we can't walk this path exactly at the same pace, we
Mm.
just are not. We're not clones of each other. We all want to find gods and goddesses who are going to complete us and mind read us and give us everything we need. And what happens in reality is we have this collision with his flaws and my human flaws. And the rest of our lives is learning to manage that. That's
Yes.
what happens in reality, right? Um, they come and they've got like this hot dagger and they stab it in your eye some of the time, right?
Yep.
And it's
Yep.
like, oh my God. And then I always say, what is the lesson I'm supposed to be learning about myself that I've married you, who I thought was my perfect partner, but you've got these things. You're so much quieter than I am. And I want to, put I don't know, some fire be underneath you. And then I think, well, maybe I need some of that
Mm.
quietness
Mm.
as well. What
It's
is it?
funny you said perfect partner, and part of my practice framework is this notion around wabi sabi. It's the beauty and imperfection. It comes from Japanese design, but
Right.
it's kind of like the concept when you break a vase and and then you glue it back together, and you can see all the cracks in it, and it goes from being broken but back together, and it looks beauty again because of all the cracks and the way that it's gone back together. And it's the same with a relationship. Like, relationships aren't perfect, as you're saying, and there is beauty in those imperfect parts that help us grow in different ways as well, whether it's more masculine, more feminine. It's the clash in between, and the lessons that you learn. And often you don't learn those lessons until after the fact as well. So we can go through a lot of turmoil in relationships, a lot of pain and hurt. But then
Right.
when the water's calm, we can reflect and go, oh, okay, well, that's why you were putting the knives upside down in the dishwasher or things like that, or that's why you're more quiet and that's why you did this or you did that. And it all comes back to that teamwork again.
Absolutely. And to the fact that every relationship has a stage of harmony,
Mm,
rupture, and repair. You can have that within a conversation 100 times, and you can have that over a period of time. It's not Facebook perfect. It's
yeah.
always a state of harmony or rupture and repair. And many of us don't know how to do the repair.
Mm,
And the repair is where the magic is. That is where you can have that coming together. And you said about the cracks. The Talmud says that in order to shine a diamond, you need another diamond.
hmm.
And that coming together is like the screeching, terrible as the diamond gets polished. And that's what marriage
Yeah, yeah,
is that it's that awful squeaky sound to get something a lot more beautiful coming forth.
yeah, yeah. So where to from here? Like, we've talked a lot about patriarchy and the impacts on relationships, and I guess the complicity from both parts, I guess,
Right.
fueled by social constructions of what it is to be a man and a woman and a husband and wife and so forth. So as a society, is this a society thing that we need to keep focusing on, or is it more at the individual level, or is it
For
both?
sure, there's collective patriarchy, black and white, men, women, the whole idea that patriarchy is based on linear. There's either men, there's women. Today, people are feeling differently about their gender roles and gender
Mhm.
definitions. And as I said, where to from here? I would like to reinforce that concept, especially with myself when I think about it, of being more fully human.
Yeah,
And being fully human means I have independence, I have vulnerability, I'm scared sometimes. I'm independent sometimes. We wired to live life together. It's not a weakness,
yeah, I
and
love
it
that.
makes our
Yeah,
life so much richer when we
yeah,
do the journey together.
yeah. So in your role as a relationship coach, like, tell us a bit about some of the work that you do. How do you do it, and who do you support at the moment?
Okay, so those are really great questions. Who do I support? I might take sides,
Hmm.
definitely, because I believe that traditional psychology has been looking at what I see in my clinic is often the shame-based people. A person is shame-based, but if you think of it as a spectrum, there's toxic shame. I feel really bad about myself, and it goes up to grandiose. And we don't
Hmm.
often address the grandiose one-up people. And the difference is the energy is the same. It's the energy of contempt. We want to come to the center of where I'm able to connect with you as well as myself at the same time, because healthy self-esteem is same as
Hmm.
you and I are same as. Why? Because God or somehow a higher power put us here. It's got nothing to do with our accomplishments. You might be a better podcaster than I am. I might be a better swimmer. It doesn't make me a more valuable person.
Mm,
And why is the energy of contempt the same? Because either I'm looking down at myself and saying, I'm such a loser, or I'm looking down at you and saying, you're such a loser.
yeah.
And we need to come to center to have intimacy
Hmm.
and connection. So that is what I highlight. I
Yeah.
look at those patterns, what's going on here, because the shame based person, he gets into an elevator. I can't remember the psychologist who said this, he turns green. The contemptuous person gets into, or the one up person gets into an elevator, lights up his cigar, and everybody else around him turns green, and he's just fine.
Hmm.
When I'm in that state of I am better than you, I am entitled, I can't even see the pain I'm causing. I'm
Yeah.
happy. Oh, so my relationships are a mess. My children are suffering because of my behavior. Oh, that sometimes needs to be highlighted. You need to come
Yeah.
down. Just like the one down needs to come up, the one up needs to come down.
Yeah. And so do you work primarily with couples or individuals as well?
Both and
Yeah.
both within the couple therapy, we might do some individual work, and we speak about the boundaries of confidentiality with that,
Yeah.
and or they might go out to another. therapist or coach.
Yeah. And how can people find you?
Yeah, I have a website, www.bev.co.il, Bev Coil, easy enough. I have a YouTube channel. I'm kind of trying to step away a little bit from Facebook, but I do have a Facebook page. I can be contacted on Messenger, LinkedIn.
Wonderful. And I'll get all the links for all your channels, and I'll put them in the show notes. If anyone wants to touch base and or check out your work, they can do that. But Bev, I've really enjoyed our chat today. But before I let you go, I always like to ask my my guests to plug something that makes them feel good. So it doesn't have to necessarily be about what we've talked about today in terms of relationships or psychology or patriarchy or anything, but it's just something that makes you feel good as a person, so that someone who might be listening might get some value out and want to check out for themselves.
What comes to mind is my husband and I have a gratitude practice. And at the end of the day, we check in with each other. We ask each other 3 things we're grateful for. And that's really changed also to sometimes, always putting in something I'm grateful that he's done that day for me, or, he just came home safely from work or whatever that is.
Yeah.
To actually acknowledge something that he's done for me that day. And I noticed that's just kind of expanded our views to see so much more gratitude in our days.
I like that. That's really cool. And it's a really good way to connect as a couple, particularly a lot of parents and couples go on autopilot when they have kids, but taking that time to reflect on each other's day is, I think, a wonderful way to connect in and come equal, as you say, see each other from each other's eyes as well. But I love that. Thanks so much for sharing that. That's a great tip.
Pleasure.
So thanks again, Bev, for coming on. I really enjoyed our chat. Patriarchy can be a very difficult discussion to have. And it's important to have these discussions on the show, because guys, particularly when we're growing and becoming mindful of who we are, it's good to see the world through different lenses as well. And patriarchy is one of those things that a lot of guys go, "Oh, I'm not entertaining this conversation," but it's important that we have these discussions. So thanks so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me. It was lovely meeting you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure that you like it and leave a comment, and then share it with your mates. Also, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a moment of future episodes to come.